I thought we got an email earlier from Ms. Hall that said there was stuff that was left out of that she wanted added into the minutes.
She did, and council, from the emails that I saw, advised that unless a committee member specifically wants to make an amendment to the minutes, that we would vote on the minutes as presented. Unless somebody else wants to say
That
it.
came in the email, and the following, I tried to keep up with all the emails today. I know,
That was the final email that came through.
That was.
that was don't change the minutes?
Not to don't change the minutes. That it would have to be a motion from somebody who's present at the meeting to make an amendment to the
Like a
minutes.
specific
She
amendment.
needs to be here.
She has to be here to actually make that.
Emails aren't.
Correct.
Okay,
Or someone
Or
else.
someone
Or someone
else.
else.
Yes.
well, I mean, I was here, that was discussed. Can we at least pause on approving them until such time as if she does come and makes an amendment to the minutes? I mean,
You just say-
yeah, I'm just saying it. I mean, if it's important, that something be included in the minutes, that.
Yes, sir. Is the floor open for discussion?
It is.
Okay. I would, from reading council's email, since it is a political action committee that we are dealing with, to refer in the minutes to a political action committee might not be in our best interest. Because one of the things that is required by statute and elections rules are that they are separate and distinct from whoever they're advocating for. So if we begin including political action committees in our minutes, then I think that we might be able to say goodbye to the advisory committees as they are. I don't think that the district will allow discussion on that matter for fear of being associated with that political action committee.
Okay.
I yield
yeah,
the floor.
Yeah, I just didn't want to vote on it if somebody had an issue with something not being included in the minutes. I didn't remember there being a specific reference to political action committee in that, but
I think instead of my recollection of it was that we shouldn't discuss it, not because of sunshine law violation, but it was because it is an entity that the school board has not engaged or has any relationship with. That was my understanding.
Anybody else? Remy, just so you know, minutes are in the process of being discussed, and then you would raise.
I emailed everybody about something I wanted added.
Sean thought your thing included referencing something about a political action committee. What was
I
your
never
thing that you?
mentioned that.
What was your thing that you wanted added into the minutes? Because it has to come as a motion, and it wasn't brought up, and so you would have to bring it up if you wanted added into the minutes.
The email doesn't serve as notice to add it into the minutes?
No.
It's got to
Okay.
be brought up this evening. Ms. Chung.
Another committee, we're not allowed to email each other. That's a violation of sunshine law, right?
You're not allowed to have back and forth communications by email, yes. As I understand this is just Ms. Hall sending one email, not asking for a response in advance of the committee meeting. The normal process on an issue like this would be that the minutes, as I understand, have been presented in draft form and now are here for a motion for approval. If there's a motion for approval, then the next step, if there's a desire to amend the minutes, would be a motion to amend by adding certain language. If there's a second for the motion to amend, then that can be added and that becomes part of the action. I don't know if at this point is there a motion to approve the minutes on the floor?
There's a
currently
motion
and a
So
second.
this would, okay, very good. There could be a motion to amend at this point then, if desired.
Well, I was only bringing it up because you had sent out something that you said something was omitted from the conversation. If you don't care, we'll approve the minutes as.
I want
as
to make
they
a
are.
motion to add that discussion to the minutes. I think it's important that that was discussed in the meeting last month, and I think it should reflect in the minutes.
If you'd like to make a motion, you should make one.
I make a motion to amend the minutes
To reflect, it, you have to be
What do you want
specific.
to reflect?
to reflect the conversation about the sales tax discussion that we had. There's no mention
you
of that. There's no mention of any of that in the
What
minutes at all.
specifically do you want to add to the minutes or change to the minutes? Language, what language do you want to add or delete?
Okay.
Because it does say on FAC update, sales tax, the district is working through the process of collecting in-depth information, period.
Which is in essence what was discussed at the meeting. It's very general, but that is the gist of what the discussion was at the last meeting. And you realize that our meetings are recorded and that through public records request is available to the public.
Yeah, it wasn't a complaint.
No,
Paul.
I'm not-
I was just
No,
saying,
I'm
hey,
not-
somebody made, said something about it earlier today. I just didn't want to breeze by it and not at least say, hey, there may have been something omitted. When I read that, okay, it's short to the point, you know.
Call the question?
No.
Point of order, I believe that we have a motion on the floor without a second.
No, I seconded it.
You did, okay, sorry. I didn't hear
The
that.
motion to amend?
No.
There is a
To-
motion
to-
to amend.
There's a
No.
motion to amend, but there is no
No
second.
second.
Do I have a second?
If you put language with it.
Okay. Yeah, I think under that FAC update, the language just, I think there needs to be another sentence added to that. I think this says the district is working through the process of collecting in-depth information. I think our committee asked a little bit more about that process. Somebody here asked if we could learn more about that, and we were kind of told no. And I think that just needs to be reflected in the minutes accurately.
What words would you like to add to the minutes?
The district is working through the process of collecting in-depth information. When we asked more about that information, we were told it could not be discussed.
That's your motion?
That's, I guess, unless what do you got, everybody was here, what does anybody else think?
The motion has to be seconded before it can be discussed.
I'll second it.
Okay, Darrell seconds. Any discussion? Okay, there being no discussion? Then, yes,
We need discussion. Are we not supposed to talk about sales tax here? Or we're talking about this
I think-
quick discussion that we had, which detailed that there might be a committee formed, and then we corrected it and said that part we can't discuss, and there is no connection with us and them. That's what I recall that conversation to be about. But as far as sales tax, we can talk about that.
I think we can talk about the district's financial needs, the capital needs.
Right. And
We can talk about the funding shortfall.
Right.
We
Our
can talk about
recommendation.
potential options to meet that shortfall, but that's the end of it.
So we can't talk about sales tax.
We can talk about,
We can talk,
it's
okay.
an option,
Okay.
but we can't talk about
We
what
can't
might
sit
be
here and
going
promote it.
on.
We can't sit here and say, oh, we're for it.
Advocate, right?
Correct. You cannot
Okay.
advocate, you can't get involved with what any PAC might be doing, saying whether
Okay.
they exist, don't exist.
And then can I follow up on the procedure part too with the minutes?
And it just,
yes, Keith.
Yeah.
you can't advocate in favor of it as an individual.
Okay.
You cannot have discussion here about a political action committee because it's important that any PAC that is formed is separate from the board advisory committee, which is a function of the board, and the board has limitations under statute as to the manner in which it can advocate for passage. Personal individuals, private individuals do not. If you're not an agent of the board, outside of acting as an advisory committee member, you're not an agent of the board.
Along the same line, we're doing a motion for the minutes, right?
Correct.
So can you explain what's the impact of minutes versus this recording? Is the recording actually a public record that's stored for a period of
Yes.
time?
Yes.
So is there, because we put it in a minute form, it's more easily accessible and might be more open?
It is not more accessible,
But-
it's public record in either form, it is maintained
Either
longer,
form,
as
so-
minutes are maintained longer than a
So that's always there, pretty much, the recording. So
It's not always there, there's a retention period.
retention period. Do you know what that is?
I want to say
years?
that it's 2 years, but I'm
Okay.
not certain of that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
That we add a sentence, like she suggested, that said there was an indication that there's an outside group researching the sales tax, but we were not able to discuss it because the language that Keith just used. Because we're an extension of the board, and I forget what you eloquently said.
We were
What he
advised
said,
of
but what he
further
said. And that's-
discussion.
And we tabled further discussion because of the restrictions that Keith just cited.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that all developed because we were inquiring whether or not we can invite them here to present to us.
Yes,
correct.
that
Okay.
is correct. I remember that.
And if you remember the sentence that's in there, the districts are working through the process of collecting in-depth information, has nothing to do with any outside group or anything they might or might not be doing. It was the district is preparing a list of capital shortfalls in the projects which create that capital shortfall. So it's the projects is the in-depth information that the district is preparing.
So, if I might, okay. No. I think it might be a good idea. I'm sorry, I can't see your name, gentleman right here that was saying
John.
Mr. Steekley, thank you. So, I really liked that idea is to say, okay, really explain within the minutes why the discussion may be limited, because we want to make sure we have that clear separation between the Finance Advisory Committee and any outside group or political action committee that may be taking some action. So I think that would be a very good way to document in the minutes the delineation of the discussion. Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion. Remy, would you recall the motion so we can go forward with what was just brought up, or do you want to?
My motion was just to amend the minutes and add that part in there, but I love what he suggested, so.
Okay, does
Why don't you
somebody
have
want
Barbara
to
read back what?
Exactly. Barb?
Oh boy. I'm going, he said this.
She was
We were asked for more information. That was seconded. Okay, outside research group.
So I think he said
We
there was an indication that there was an outside group working on the sales tax. Is
Right.
Is that how you said it?
Outside group
Kind of
research and sales tax.
quoting what Chris said.
Oh, and because we are an extension of the board, so we tabled further discussion.
It was inappropriate for us to discuss.
Okay.
We didn't table it.
It would
because that
be
would've been-
Oh, not-
inappropriate to continue discussion.
That's what we were told during the meeting.
Oh my goodness. Appropriate. Further discussion. Okay.
Okay, Barb, if you could reread that.
Oh gosh. You keep doing this to me. I wish I had a minute. Okay. Rainey made a motion to amend the minutes. Darrell seconded it. And then, she had said when we were asked for more information, Mr. Martin explained.
I think you can just go to the final motion.
Okay. Indication of outside research regarding sales tax, and we came, because it was an extension of the board. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. It was inappropriate. Oh wait, I'll walk.
Was the
I
Yeah.
will start again.
Yeah, may I help maybe with some
Thank you.
recommendation on language and wording?
Yes.
And we have our expert here, so he can tell us whether this is okay or not.
Okay.
During the meeting, when asked about the work or the details of the outside group, advisory committee members were advised that they may serve on a political action committee as private citizens, but shouldn't do so in their capacity as a member of an advisory committee, and that as members of an advisory committee should not discuss the details of a political action committee, and vice versa.
Well, I
That's what
have
it
a problem with that,
Yeah.
because that wasn't said.
Yeah, that wasn't said at all.
Today.
Yeah,
Last-
that was
last
said today.
meeting.
Last meeting, it was just the,
Okay, and I thought I was
a
repeating
question
what
came
Keith was
up
just
about
saying,
an,
so.
a
yeah.
question came up about an outside group
Mm-hmm, right.
working, and we were told that it was, I specifically said it was inappropriate for us to discuss that in the advisory committee meeting. I think that's
I think that's it.
reflects
That is-
what happened.
That's
Okay.
nice and simple. Yes.
Okay,
Now,
Okay.
now the minutes for this meeting should reflect exactly what Amy
okay,
said.
okay, which
Oh.
I was trying to repeat what Keith
Oh.
was just saying, but that was, okay.
Because we did discuss it in this meeting.
Yeah,
Oh.
okay, got it.
So the minutes
Okay.
for this meeting will
I
reflect.
hope they're not going to want me to read
This
it.
Can
meeting
somebody make a
discussed
motion
last
relating
week.
to what Ms. Patrica just said as the amendment to the minutes?
I move that the amendment to the amendment be what Ms. Patrica just said.
Second.
Well, Rainey made the motion to do the
No, she
amendment.
recalled.
She recalled the.
Oh, did
she
you recall?
recalled the-
Okay.
Yep, she did. So he's starting clean.
A new second, a new amendment.
And a new
New
section
motion
on
to
that.
amend, yes.
Any further discussion on that? Mr. Martin, does that verbiage,
Yeah, that's fine. So there was a motion to amend in a second based upon the verbiage provided by Ms. Patrica.
that's correct.
Very good.
Okay.
You're ready for a vote.
Okay,
Our
all in
discussion.
favor?
Aye.
Be unanimous.
And now the motion has been amended. Now it's time to vote on the main motion as it has been amended.
The minutes.
Mhm.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Now,
We already
you have
As
a
amended.
motion. Now it's just time for a vote on that.
All in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Sorry, Barb.
Holy cow.
Okay.
I can't even read my own writing.
Seeing
why
no
you gotta
members
record
of the
it. I know,
public
thank you.
at the meeting this evening, we call the public portion, and we'll consider that closed. Next would be Ms. Patrica's presentation, and I would like to go on record and thank you for the kind words at the board meeting that you mentioned about our committee.
You guys are really great. I'm really, really excited to be here and to work with you, and I may have to fight to be here for 2 years in a row. Because I'm really excited. I mean, think of the impactful recommendations you guys have made to the board and the fact that we're following through on them. The naming rights, obviously, the efficiency audit, and I have asked the superintendent, and I will continue to urge him to make sure that you're an integral part of that process as it moves forward. And finally, the sales tax, which I know that that's part of something we discuss at every meeting, so if it's okay, I'll address that now. We had a workshop on Tuesday about the half-penny sales tax, and 6 of the 7 board members indicated that they would show support for that at an action meeting on Tuesday. There was lengthy discussion. I know that you guys have probably seen some things in the media about it. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to take those. But I'm saddened that we're in the position we're in due to such a significant decrease in state funding and county funding. But I'm heartened, I'm encouraged that the board has the courage to move forward and do what we need to do for our students, because this is not easy. As an elected official, going out in Lee County and asking people for money is not easy. But the majority of the people on this board are doing the right thing, and I'm encouraged by that. So what are your questions with regard to what you've read in the media?
Not even with the media, just on Facebook alone, there's a bunch of different groups, including the Civic Association in Cape Coral, about 10 or 15 of them. More negative and misinformation out there than facts.
Yep.
Most people just think that there was somebody didn't handle the funds properly or was stealing, and both of those are actually out there. And there's actually nobody defending it in any way, shape, or form, or putting the facts out there. What is the school system doing to put the facts out there?
Yeah, that's a struggle that I have as an elected official. I think it's inappropriate for me to engage with people on social media, because frequently people will sit behind a keyboard and they have a lot more courage behind
Right.
a keyboard than they do face to face. So to engage in that kind of a discussion, it feels unprofessional to me. So I don't do that. What I can tell you is that a political action committee is likely to be created after the vote on Tuesday, and that political action committee will put together a plan associated with private citizens outside the realm of the district to help promote this. It will be a campaign, just like any other campaign, and addressing those concerns will be part of that. I also know that we as a district will work on getting the facts out. We can promote the facts of the reasons why we need this, and counter any misinformation or disinformation that's out there. So what I will do as a board member is I will go in front of any group that will listen to me, and I will talk to them about the need, and I will address their questions. And I've, so far, just today, had significant success. I've convinced 2.5 people to vote. 2.5 people. All right, 2.25 people to vote for the sales tax based on misinformation that they heard on social media and in the newspaper. So that's only 2.5 people. The more groups I can get in front of, questions I can take, I believe, the better off we're going to be. Does that make sense?
So you are interested in going before these groups? I got a
Invite
phone
me.
call by the head of the Civic Association and said, well, what are they doing about this? And I
Yep.
said, why don't you just invite them in?
Yep,
I
invite me, I'll
said
be there.
February, March, I said, have them come to your meeting, let them give, say what they have to say, and then they'll take questions and see how you feel when they leave.
And I appreciate that. And I would also urge you as individual citizens, if you support this, to also answer questions, even if you don't support it. I think you have a grasp of our financial situation. So if somebody says to you, well, the lottery should be used for that. You know that the lottery is controlled by the state. It's not controlled by us. We're in the situation we're in because of decrease in state and county funding. So you can give the facts.
federal dollars and everywhere else.
And we are having an action meeting on Tuesday, and there will be a lot of negativity there. And if any of you want to come and speak on behalf of this, that would also be welcomed.
So is
Please.
this something that's going to come up on the ballot in November?
It will be May
March
15th.
A referendum.
A
Special
special
election.
That's another
election will be
question
held on May
people are
15th.
fighting. Why
So
are we paying
who's
$800,000
paying for that?
We are. The school district is paying for that.
How much is that going to cost?
At the high end maximum, and I'm hoping to get that maximum down based on some of the input that I gave you, will be about $880,000.
Why not just put it on the ballot in November?
Well, there's more political reasons why we can't do, well, you definitely cannot do it in November. In November, we have a Senate race, we have a governor's race. We also have a list of constitutional amendments that is likely to be as long as I am tall. And voters, the issue, this important issue, will get lost in the noise of the other elections. The media will give their attention to those other items. So Sarasota County is going through this same thing right now. They have a referendum coming up on May 15th. And I watched their meeting, super uber conservative county, actually more conservative than Lee. I watched the meeting in which they approved the expenditure of money for a special election. And the leader of the PAC for them, the outside group, the citizen group that's working to promote the campaign for them, spoke to the board and said 3 things. He said, you are significantly more likely to lose in anything other than a special election because of what I just explained to you. The noise of the other issues crowds out our message. The Political Action Committee itself, the cost is 3 times greater for them to raise the money necessary to educate the public on the issues. And in a primary election, you have your ideologues show up. Your extreme conservatives and your extreme liberals are the only ones who show up. In terms of voter turnout, if you look at Sarasota County, voter turnout for a special election is around the same it is for a primary election, if not higher. When I first heard $880,000, I had the same look on my face that you do right now, which is how the heck could they, well,
I just taken it in. I've never heard of you.
the look on my face was like, how the heck can we spend $880,000? And then I said all this at the workshop the other day, but I wasn't elected to react. I was elected to think and analyze. And so I looked at that number, $880,000, in the context of our overall budget and, more importantly, in the context of the amount of revenue that will be generated. Conservative estimate of revenue generated per year is about $50 million. $880,000 is about 1.76% of that. And the board will likely approve a 10-year time frame based on the information I received in the workshop. Over a 10-year time frame, $880,000 is 0.18%. So the cost, the investment to me, is definitely worth the amount of money we'll get out of it.
So the turnout, though, is going to be much lower in a May than it would be in the regular in November. You're just saying that, are you saying that there's ideologues on either side that'll show up in May, or only ideologues would show up in November?
Well, our hope is to engage as many people as humanly possible between now and May 15th. And I think the timing of it is perfect because our snowbirds are still here. So we can engage them, we can help them to understand the need for this, and we can get them to either vote by mail or show up to the ballot, or show up to
But
the
the
polls if
snowbirds
they're
aren't.
still here.
The snow-
They're gone by April.
The snowbirds aren't
They're gone by Easter.
voters.
Yeah.
There's March 30th.
Yeah,
A
yeah,
large
lot of them are.
percentage
A
are.
lot of them, my mom's a snowbird, she's definitely a voter.
So she lives at least 6 months here?
Yeah, you have to get 183 days in order to avoid
183,
the
right.
income tax and you know.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I thought that most of them were registered in another state to vote.
No, you
No.
have to be registered in the state where you reside in order to avoid that income tax in another
Our
state.
clients,
Yeah.
That's one of the indicators of domicile.
183 days.
Yes,
This tragedy, the tragedy of picking that date, was that something all developed at the workshop, or was there someone else that said, let's pick this date because it might be a low turnout,
No.
which might actually be better?
no, low turnout has not entered into my decision-making process at
Okay.
all. Staff came to us with that date. They've talked to the county commission who has to approve this, and they've talked to the supervisor of elections, and the time frame that the supervisor of elections needs is 90 to 120 days.
So
So
that
the
fit right there.
soonest we can do it is May 15th. The other piece of this that I want you to try to understand is if we wait until the August primary, which is August 28th, we as a board approve the final budget. We do the final budget run through on July 31st. So one of two things will happen. We will go into budgeting not knowing the outcome. So we won't be able to utilize this money until the beginning of the 2020 school year, or we'll force Amy and her team to create two budgets, one for the contingency of we have the sales tax, one for the contingency that we don't. They already expend tremendous time and effort and resources into creating just one budget. And the budgeting process impacts finance, and it impacts transportation, and it impacts operations, it impacts academic services, it impacts technology. I want our staff focused on improving student outcomes and student achievement and closing the achievement gap. I don't want them focused on creating two budgets.
Also in November, is there 2 board members up for election?
Yeah, that's going to be true. There's likely to be a primary election for board members too, and that's going to be a defining issue probably in a school board. So rather than focus on the facts
at
and
one
the data
time.
and the importance of this for our students, we'll be focusing on a political fight about who wants to get elected.
Let me ask you about this is about $50 to $60 million, and our budget is what, 1.3 billion?
Closer to 1.5.
So what percentage is 60 million? And I'm wondering, I'm just gonna throw it all out there now. The efficiency study, I thought that goal was to find out whether or not we wanted to do sales tax.
Yeah.
And now we spent 400,000 and we don't have any real results that we know of. But what if that efficiency study comes back and says, hey, here's $90 million? Is that gonna be, and then we get that approved, now all of a sudden, we got all this extra money. Not that it's gonna happen.
It's a
But-
different
but-
pot of money.
But the efficiency study's goal, I thought, for us, was to understand if we needed to go toward the sales tax. And so now, I see a lot of professionals. I like the presentations, I like how you guys got everything in order, but this efficiency study, after this, kind of takes away some of what I've seen, the product here at the school. I feel like there's something wrong here with the efficiency study not being done first.
Okay, that's good feedback. I can tell you want to jump in. That was not my understanding. My understanding was that because efficiency is operations dollars, I thought we had clearly made the presentation to this committee regarding capital need.
dollars.
And you told us you need an additional
Okay.
source of revenue. We recommend the half-penny
So the
sales
sales
tax.
tax is capital.
Correct.
Okay,
That's what I mean by
my
different
mistake.
pots of money.
Okay.
Capital and
Yes.
transportation.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Amy, I'm sorry.
then that took care of it, because I didn't realize it was everything.
Yeah, no, I think that just about covers it. The only other thing was the operational audit, the efficiency audit, I thought came as a recommendation out of here to be able to communicate with the public, because we're gonna have to do that ongoing anyway about our efficiencies, those things, it's gonna do two things. It's gonna bring out the things that we do really well, and I hope
Right.
that there'll be some things on the report to be able to report back to the public about that. And then in addition, if it says there are some areas that you may wanna delve into further so that we can give you some recommendations about what possibly you can improve, then it's going to be beneficial to us to have that information, whether we have a sales tax or not. Because if we want to have, confidence from the public ongoing, and then also to possibly, do other things in the future related to fundraising and things like that, it's important for the public to have that information. So the efficiency audit is going to be valuable to us either way it goes.
Continue support.
Absolutely.
Before I forget, today I was reading something about I think it was Sarasota or some county up north approved the union contract, and they gave their support personnel 1.5%. But the thing that struck me interesting is that they took some funds from the capital budget and put it towards it. So our operational budget can't go towards capital, is that right?
Correct.
But capital can go into operational?
There's a.
So if we approve this tax and then we find some other savings, can we take that capital and move it over to operational?
No, it's really, I'm not sure, did you say county up north in Florida somewhere?
Yeah, up north, I'll get to the article if you want to see
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I'm
But
not sure.
it said that they negotiated a deal and they were able to cover it by applying some of the capital budget towards these raises.
Okay, so I'm not sure how they did that, but there'd be a few things. Typically, it's the other way around, right?
Mhm.
We can use operations dollars for capital type expenditures if we chose to. However, there's usually, you got a lot of things going on in operations, so it's not like you have $70 and $80 million to carve out of there and build a school, in capital, using those dollars. So we don't
It usually goes the other way.
do that. For capital to operating, right, to take money from capital and putting into operating, there are some very specific rules as to how and when you can do that. So you can take some money from capital and move it into operating when you're doing it to cover maintenance like expenditures that would be capital type expenditures. So if they were using some of that money, say, to cover raises for maintenance workers who did some of that work, then I could see that happening and that working. So, but there's very specific reasons why you can take money from capital and put it into operations, but it's got to be to cover maintenance like expenditures, and it's detailed in statute as to why you can do
I'll
that.
send you the article.
Yeah.
Sean,
I'll
it's
find it.
controlled by the state, imagine that.
Imagine that.
And so, I know Collier had a referendum for an election down there, and it's actually up for renewal, where they sought permission from voters to move 0.25 mil from capital to operating. And the voters approved that. So it can happen with a special referendum, but otherwise it doesn't, it can't go that way.
Right.
Thank you.
And also going back to that, the efficiency study, remember it serves for watchdogs who feel that money is not being spent appropriately. So if the board comes back and says, now we need to float a bond because the sales tax didn't do enough, somebody needs to take a look at that efficiency study. Did administration follow all the recommendations in that efficiency study that were appropriate? So that is another tool that can be used. As part of this committee, we're going to have access to that efficiency study. We made the recommendation. That's something we're going to have access to. And before we're going to make future recommendations for revenue streams, we're obviously going to review that report in its entirety.
When is that report due?
The total efficiency audit report, we expect to get results or some recommendations from them by March, or end of March, early April, I believe is their timeline.
Are those preliminary results, or is that the final report?
They would be the first phase. So phase one of the audit was to look at all of our data and do some analysis of that, some comparative analysis with other districts in state and out of state, and then based on that, give us some information about some of our data that looked really good. And if we have anything that they suggested, areas that we needed to dig deeper into for additional recommendations for improvements, then that would be a phase two, which we could choose to enter into or not.
Right, okay.
And that's what I hope you guys to be deeply involved in.
Thank you.
I've got a question. Since you're holding a May election, just looking at the numbers in elections for the city of Cape Coral, they hold about a 13% turnout. which is absolutely horrific. And that's when a time frame that people actually know that there's an election, and that's the normal. At that point, you can only count on basically your super voters. At that point, out of 165,000, you're lucky to get between 13 and 16,000 to show up. And like I said, I'm just talking in the city of Cape Coral.
Right.
To hold an election in May, you're going to have to win the majority, literally, of just super voters, no one else, because most of the other people, I'm not saying their votes don't matter, but in the grand scheme of things, they're really not going to matter. It's going to be your super voters from Lee County that's going to run this election. Have you guys even considered or discussed how to reach them specifically? Because it's going to be won or lost by at-home voting.
And I mean, you know, we as a district cannot engage in any kind of a campaign for this. So
Education?
Oh yeah, education for sure. And like I said, I mean, I'm not the only board member who's willing to go out and speak to anybody who will listen to me. So there's going to be some of that SAC meetings, encouraging parents to get out there and vote, encouraging teachers to get out there and vote, encouraging people who understand this to talk to their neighbors and to talk to their friends and help them understand the importance of showing up. I mean, I was on the phone with my son's doctor the other day, and he told me, nurses are second only to teachers in my mind. And I was like, well, we might have this happening. I mean, literally, anybody who will listen to me are potential voters, and I'm encouraging them to get out May 15th and vote, assuming the board approves this on Tuesday night.
And we are set up for them to do the at-home ballot, the vote by vote?
Absolutely, yeah.
Now?
Yeah. And I'm actually hoping that's one of the ways that we can save money. Lee County is one of the few counties that includes return postage on their mail-in ballots.
Yes.
And that would be an $88,000 savings, which would decrease the cost of the election at the high-end estimate by about 10%.
When we did studies, what was it, 6 years ago, they were pretty high at those people, with people voting at home. And I was actually surprised because I looked at my own record and I hadn't missed a vote since the year 2000 just because of the way it was set up. Even if I would forget to go on election day or was going to be busy, I was always able to vote from home. I haven't seen with Mr. Doyle, the new election supervisor, the big campaign going to get more people signed up though to vote at home. Places they would usually show up. They haven't been a presence there. At least in the last year and a half, I haven't seen anything.
I can give you an update on that. 100 Democrats have, 100 more Democrats have enrolled in vote by mail. 700 fewer Republicans have lost their right to vote by mail because they don't do auto renewal on that vote by mail. You have to make an affirmative election for that. So it lapsed, so they just have to reaffirm.
Okay.
So
I just haven't seen them there signing up like they would show up at different events around the city that I always go to. And for like a year and a half, I'm recognizing they're not there to sign people up, which I think that's going to be very, very important to this cause, one way or another. Doesn't matter which side you stand on. That's the winner of the loss.
Yeah, I want you to leave this discussion with the impression from me, as your representative on the board, that the failure is not an option here. We need this money for our children, and I will do everything that I have the energy and human capacity to do to get out there and spread that message. And we need your help to do that. You know, we need your help to spread the facts. You guys have taken a deep dive. Turn around, look at that poster. That poster that shows. That poster that shows the decrease in state funding as compared to the increase. The white line is the increase in student population. The green line is the decrease in state funding. That is not a relationship that is sustainable. That is a relationship that is creating a crisis that we need to address. And I just think that that's very
And that's also, I believe, by design and not by happenstance.
Well, yeah, but I like we discussed earlier. I'm sorry, sir. Absolutely.
There's a few people that asked me to
Absolutely.
ask the question.
Absolutely. I have to deal with reality. And our reality is I am working with the state to the greatest extent possible to help them understand this crisis. Did I tell you about the conversation I had with Matt Caldwell? So Amy was there. We presented that information. We presented all of our capital information to him. We have $117 million coming in. We have a $447,000 capital need. What, for $447 million capital need. He said, why don't we, the legislature, give you the ability to charge a full penny sales tax? That'll bring in $120 million. In exchange, you give up your 1.5 mil. That's bringing in $117 million. He proposed a $3 million net increase in funding to meet a $447 million need. That's the reality of what we're facing at the state level. You talk to county commissioners about increasing impact fees. There is simply no appetite there. As much as I'd like to see the state give us what we need, as much as I'd like to see the county commissioners give us what they need, they're not giving it to us. So I've got to face that reality, and I've got to secure the funding for our students and for our community. I mean, this is about the economic health of Lee County. This is about your property values. This is about good schools driving up property values. You know education is an economic driver in this community. So I've got to face reality. I've got to overcome my own political objections to taxation and understand this is the basic function of government. Provision of infrastructure is the basic function of government. At this point, we are failing the citizens of Lee County with regard to the provision of infrastructure. It's our time to step up and do the right thing. So
I have one
that's where I
question on
stand.
Matt Caldwell. He is against us asking for this half-cent sales tax.
You've just made my point.
Okay.
He will not give us the money at the state level, and he's also against us
But
getting
he
it at
wouldn't
the local
support a
level.
1 cent sales tax either.
He said in that meeting that he would give us the authority to charge a 1 penny sales tax. You were there.
Yeah.
In exchange for us giving up, charging 1.5
Oh,
mil.
I understood he was anti any sales tax.
All I can tell you is that's what he said in that meeting.
Hey, $3 million a year, 100 years, it'd take care of our problems if we have no more growth.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've talked too much at this meeting today, but I also feel like this is a really important topic. Do you guys have any other questions?
Do we expect that growth to continue at
Yes.
that rate? And like how far out have we looked to project that?
So we've got 10 years out at this point, and inside of those 10 years are percentage of growth, and right now that percentage is about 1.5% to 2% in that time period. In that 10 years, we're still talking anywhere between 1% and 2% in those 10 years.
And those numbers have been confirmed by the state. This is not Lee County School Board willy-nilly coming up with numbers with projections. We've worked with a mathematician at FGCU to really tighten up our growth projection formula, and all of these numbers, including our capital needs, number of buildings we have to build, that kind of thing, have been approved by the state.
But the county commissioners have not approved the special election right now.
Not yet, but that's ministerial.
But the board hasn't. The board has to do that first.
Correct, right.
Yeah, and then it goes to the Board of County Commission.
If by chance, I know I'm throwing a wrench in there, if by chance the charter schools were to close, because right this second there's police investigations into theft with the city charter schools in Cape Coral, would we be able to assume all those children into the system? Or would that cause even more of an economic hardship on the system?
Yes and yes. So we'd have to, because we can't have kids show up at the door at student assignment and say, sorry, we do not have a seat for you. So we would have to place them in seats somewhere, but of course it would create even more of a hardship, because the projections that we look at what we call COFTE, which is just those butts in our traditional seats, right? So charters are even excluded from that, because we're assuming that a certain percentage of that growth is going to go to a charter. So if those charter schools were to close, then of course that makes that projection that much larger over the period of time, because now we're having to handle those students as well. So it creates even more of a need at that point.
And then when we had last meeting where we talked about 7069, where now we're losing funding, state
Right.
funding to the charter schools that
Right.
could be closing down, and now we're taking on the responsibility of those students from the charter schools. So it's a dual-edged sword that's
Right.
working against us even further.
Right.
But
Mhm.
would
we
you
use
get
their
the money
facilities?
back that you're
No, you couldn't.
losing?
You wouldn't get it back.
Yeah, well,
It's already been spent.
yeah,
It's
I mean,
But going forward.
going forward,
Oh, yeah,
yes,
forward,
yes, going forward,
You
yes,
have
but
an empty school to put the kids in.
Maybe, it depends on what school closed down, because for our charter schools, they don't have the same building regulations that a traditional school does. So if we were to try to go take over a building and the building didn't meet the SREF requirements or the building code requirements that traditional schools have, we could not house kids in that building. So it's a I shouldn't say it's a useless building, we'd have to sell it or do something else with it, because we couldn't put our kids in it.
And John, you asked about if we get that money back.
Well, I don't mean back, but I mean going forward.
Right, going
It's
forward.
in our budget rather than their budget.
But many of these privately backed charter schools have a knack for closing right after the student count. So right after they've received the money that they're going to receive, FTE, full-time equivalent for each student, they close right after that count has been made. So we don't recapture any of the money for that school year for that child. We only get that money for the next school year for that child.
Can you do clawbacks in your contracts with charter schools?
Yes, we do have such provisions in the contract, and there have been times where we have attempted to recover monies for closed charter schools. We've had very limited success in that respect, because normally what we find is that the charter school proper, which is the nonprofit board, does not have the money any longer. There's nothing to recover from them, because they almost all have contracts with management companies who actually run the school, provide the services, and through their contracts with those companies, they have transferred the great majority of the funds at the time that they're received. So they're outside of the hands of the entity with which we have a contract to be able to recover that money from.
How many dollars are we talking about? 670 million or 1,000?
Dollars to do what? I'm sorry.
That they close right after the FTE.
26 million, 28 million, 23 million. I served on the board. I was on the City Cape Coral Charter School Governing Board for the last 3 years.
So that's what they lost.
So
The
basically, if
district
they were
lost.
closed, that's what the district loses. I believe it's like 26 or 27 million this year.
That's the money they received from the state for those students.
Yeah, that Lee County schools could have used if they needed to take over those.
And it's
With
still
what's going
have
on,
to
that's why I said it's a very
if it
good
closes.
possibility from the
Yes,
knowledge
we
that I
do.
happen to have that there's something coming down the pipe. I'm not exactly sure which way it's going to go, but it's looking like this is a possibility. That's why I asked the question occasionally.
And I would say it depends on the size of the school, because the state allocation for the most part is based on the number of FTE, that goes with the kids. So $7,500 per FTE about is what we're receiving from the state right now. So depending on how many kids that school had in the count, that dictates how much money really we're talking about. So.
Well, I can walk down to Fort Myers Beach Pier and throw $1,000 off the end of the pier and have as much education in that as the charter schools are providing. And without stronger clawbacks for these schools, and even tracing the money into, and if it means going to our legislature and saying, look, we need some clawback provisions, we really need some teeth to this. Or maybe even a county ordinance.
You hit it right there. The state limits what the district can demand be in that contract. So
Right.
if the state won't let you
Now
put a
they have a
clawback-
template that we have to use.
Yeah. So if there's no clawback in that template, you
Right.
can't put a clawback in it.
I will convince you.
That's really scary. I
It
mean,
is scary.
to watch our budgets go, and then 50% mandated by 7069 has to be split with the charter schools for capital expansion as well. So can they do the same thing with that without any clawback rules?
Has there been an update on the
Yeah, those
lawsuit
funds are
against
the
them,
same as-
against the state?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Is there a lawsuit, update on the lawsuit with the state? Or is that going to hold off until they meet in March?
Get our expert here.
But the lawsuit is still pending, it's filed. We don't have any court rulings at this point. We're using every legal measure we can to try to get this issue before the court as quickly as possible, because the funds have to be paid here soon. So we're trying to get resolution, but I don't have any good news to share with you yet.
Can it hold off till they go into session? Since session begins
Hold
in
off
a few-
doing what?
making that payment until.
That's part of what we're working on, but I don't have any good news for you yet. We're making efforts before the court to try to get relief in that respect, but no orders yet.
Because that's gonna play a big role too, and.
Yes, sir, it's a large amount of money.
Yes, Kevin?
We
I
have,
had a
we have
question
not made
about
one
the
yet.
impact fees. What's the county say about restoring the impact fees to where they were?
Right now, they're saying that they're undergoing their required study, which they will undergo. I know that I read comments in the paper yesterday from Commissioner Pendergrass, who I believe is the chair, isn't he the chair of the
Yes.
county commission? Indicating that if we were successful in a half-penny sales tax, then that would be justification for them to eliminate impact fees for schools altogether. Because he said it's double taxation, which to me either indicates a lack of understanding of how impact fees work, or just intentionally misleading the public. I don't want to accuse him of that, but Mr. Martin has given me a fantastic explanation of how impact fees are calculated, if you wouldn't mind.
Certainly. The impact fee is just that, it's not a tax in terms of it's not in any way related to the value of the residence. You do pay a impact fee at the time you pull a permit for the purpose of building a residence, but the amount of the fee has no relation to the value of the home that's being constructed. The cost is, the amount of the fee is based upon the impact of that new residence, the additional cost that it requires to be expended for the acquisition of additional student stations. So, for example, just to give you a very basic description of the way that the fee is calculated, it is based upon the cost of a new student station, what it costs the school district to create another station, another desk, another location for a student to be served, times the generation rate, the likely number of students to be served by the public school district that will come from that new residence. And that's the calculation, those two numbers, but then also it's backed out in the calculation, they back out a credit for the amount of other funding provided for the purpose of building new student stations. So the 1.5 mils would be a credit. If there's a sales tax, that would be a credit. Because again, the purpose of an impact fee is only to pay for the cost of the impact created by that new residence on the need for additional funding to pay for new student stations, the need for which is created by that new residence.
So, what was the impact of, how much more money would come in on an annual basis if the impact fees were restored to their former level back when they were
It's very, very small.
At this point, about 6 to 8 million a year.
Okay, so that's a pretty small impact.
Yes.
Because I think there's probably some people out there would feel, their first response to the sales tax would be, well, that should come out of impact fees, because that need is being created by growth. And the people that are building these new homes and moving here should be, paying for the additional financial need for building schools for their kids that are coming in. So, now the money obviously doesn't work out.
Right, exactly.
Because one of the ways that I would turn around what he said and say, look, the fact that we're pushing for a half-penny sales tax increase should put pressure on the county to pony up, go back to the impact fees that were taken away. And that's the argument. Look, we got stuff taken away from us politically back in 08 or whatever it was. At least restore that. So,
But their reaction has been the opposite. I
yeah,
have a
which
better,
is weird. It doesn't make any
I
sense.
have a better graphic. I don't know how close I need, but the red at the top of this one indicates loss of impact fees.
Oh, okay, yes, that's good.
Oh.
Yeah.
So if you can see that.
Very little.
I need to get the red added to my poster. Can you all see that?
Do you know if the county was ever considering their own half-cent tax and maybe we jumped them on it and they're not happy with it?
No. I've not heard any talk from any other government entity regarding a tax increase right now. There is a group working on a tax increase for Children's Services Council, but that won't hit the ballot until November, if at all.
So this would
And
take us
that's a
from
millage rate, not a
6% to
sales.
6.5%.
Correct. And the average impact for a family of four in Lee County is
$64
$64.
for $50 to $60,000 a year income level.
And misinformation on the news yesterday indicated that the tax could be as much as $1,000 on a car. It's my understanding that the tax is only charged on the first $5,000 of the purchase price of
Any
a car
surtax,
for a
yes.
maximum of $25.
The half-cent increase would add $25 to the cost of a new or used vehicle.
No more than
No
that.
more than that.
Correct.
Because it's only the half on.
The surtax
up to the
ends
$5,000.
at $5,000 of a
Yep.
purchase.
Surtax is only paid on the first 5,000 in all 67 counties.
A half
But again,
percent,
that was
5,000.
misinformation that was on the news, and we need,
The-
to your
the-
point,
the
we need to get out ahead of
Yeah, on
that.
the 6th.
Yeah.
There's the graph.
Oh, yay, thank you.
And
You're so good with technology. I had to say that. I'm sorry.
They had to teach me how to use this projector when I came in, so that's,
now she's a pro.
I am. I can
Well,
get
we
it.
had one of two choices. We had to either get appointed a 15-year-old or have Todd.
Is there a slide that has the additional data point of the shortfall? Because, I mean, this shows enrollment and revenue, but not need.
There's the pie chart that right there that shows the total need and where that need is.
Okay.
But I think what we want to add to it based on, I think what you're saying and what we've heard before is, okay, show me kind of like a bar graph that shows where your money is, but where you need it to be.
Right.
Kind of like throughout the years.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're gonna create to also add to that.
And then if there's already been a list formulated of some sort that says, okay, so should this not go through and we have X shortfall, this is what's going away or not, or can't, I mean, have that already been, spoken about and listed so that, there's a clear understanding of if this doesn't happen, these are the things that cannot happen within the district.
You're not allowed to say they cannot happen because the class size amendment says you must have a seat for everybody that shows up. So what would happen is more borrowing.
Yeah.
And we currently spend $124,000 a day in debt service. If we had to borrow the extra $500 million to meet this, that'd be another $124,000 a day in debt service. So 4 days worth of that pays for that special election.
And there's portables, with the amount of portables, we could probably build a new school.
Not only that, but every single time we borrow another dollar, it takes more money out of our ability to maintain the facilities we already have. That's the part that's truly alarming to me. I mean, we can borrow money and we can get squeaky brand new schools that everybody's really proud of, while the schools that we have in existence are suffering. So for me, the long-term impact of this is really important.
There was a comment a few weeks.
Is sales tax used just for new construction or for that whole?
For the whole
pie?
pie. Any capital expense.
There was a comment a few meetings ago, what if we just don't pay this 7069 fee? I don't know if y'all remember that, somebody mentioned it. Well, we just don't pay it. What happens?
A lawsuit.
We would force discussion.
Well,
right?
there's potential of a lawsuit, yes, but the other potential is it's compliance with statute
So they would
and the
reduce us.
statutory authority for the Department of Education to threaten and eventually
Just more
withhold
money.
funding from the school district for failure to comply. This an issue we addressed somewhat with student assessments a few years ago, if you remember that issue.
But isn't it a violation of the Florida Constitution what they proposed, the legislation?
Well, that certainly is the theory of our lawsuit, but until that's ruled on by a court, the statute.
I think not paying would be fun though.
I don't think it would be fun.
There's no money. Yeah, checks stop coming.
When the checks stop coming, then it would be so much fun.
Why with rates and
Sounds like we can have a good time.
Yep.
Yeah.
why aren't we
Lock the
looking
doors.
at general obligation bonds?
The success of general obligation bonds in elections across the state of Florida has not been high. Half-penny sales tax is much more palatable, and plus it spreads the cost of this over, about a third of it will be borne by tourists, whereas with the general obligation bond, it's all property owners. So it's just on the backs of Lee County residents.
That's
So-
what Ted and I disputed. Back and forth about the exact same thing.
And property values have gone up in the past couple of years. Our rate has stayed the same, right? So it sounds like there might have been, was there an increase in revenue because of increased property values? And do we realize that yet, or is that something that's still going to be reported on in the future?
Yeah, we've realized that if you go back to that graph, Kelly, on the screen, you'll see that the ends of the bars, they are coming up. You see them come up a little bit because that really is the function of the property values going up, because that really is the one main source of revenue that we have in capital right now. But even still, the 10-year projection that we have, it accounts for increases in property tax value throughout that 10-year time span, but we're also looking at what our need is over that 10-year time span as well. So yeah, we assume that our property values are going to continue to increase, but that doesn't mitigate the shortfall.
It just seems like such a small part of that compared to what I've seen out there with the prices going up.
Well, I mean, our tax roll increased 8% this year.
8%. And that converts to 8% more revenue?
That what
Okay.
approximately, yeah. So we went from, I think, 95 million in last year up to about 117 this year.
Okay.
So yeah, we assume that that is going to happen, but still within those 10-year projections, we're still looking at when you see that significant reduction. And then as as your buildings continue to age and to compound some of your maintenance issues based on maintenance you deferred in the past, you get that, it begins to do this.
So it's 100, so I'm still thinking the 1.3 billion budget, but that's not all property taxes. There's gonna be other parts of it.
No.
Property tax is only about
41%
100.
of that comes from federal and state.
Okay.
So of
property
that
tax is about
budget,
100.
remember there's 6 different funds we have in the budget. Capital is the one fund that we're talking about here that we have in the budget, and that revenue there this year was about 125 million. So that's the one fund we're talking about.
And see, this is why
that
I
comes
love
from
this
property
group.
tax,
They
you
have
think?
such a-
Capital?
The main source of money within the capital fund is property
Property
taxes.
taxes.
That's the one significant source of funding we have left. We used to have some state funding, capital funding. We have very little of that now, 1.5 million. We've got a little bit of impact fees. I think it was about 6 million we projected for this year. The one main source of revenue in capital is property taxes at that 117 million.
Is property taxes exclusive to capital funding, or is there more property taxes that go to other operations?
So general fund also has property taxes in there as well,
Okay.
right? So the state has, in the general fund, the state has our Florida Education Finance Program, which is the formula that they use to fund school districts. So they're going to calculate the total amount of money that the school district can receive based mostly on the number of kids that we have. And then of that total amount, 650 million this year, some of that is going to be